Welcome to Evangelicalish, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the American Evangelical Church, deconstruction, faith, and God's love through it all. Join us for these episodes live on our Evangelicalish YouTube page on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central, and 6 o'clock Pacific. Let's journey together.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's live recording of Evangelicalish, or recorded version if you're listening on Apple Podcast or any other platform where you get your podcast out there. I am Paul.
I'm April.
And Jeremy is on dad assignment tonight. So we miss Jeremy and hope you're doing all right. And if it's snowing again in Oklahoma, you're doing okay. And we'll find out more about that. But glad you're with us tonight on Evangelicalish. And if you like what we do, we are asking everyone to go to our website, evangelicalish.com. That's evangelical with an ish on the end of it.com. Not like George Santos says that he's Jewish, but evangelicalish. That's us. So evangelicalish.com. And you can subscribe for as little as $4.99 a month. We have about every 2 months a private Zoom hangout with our ish community, and you get some other cool stuff, our chat room and everything, and you help us continue to do what we do through this work we do here in the ish community. So evangelicalish.com, check it out. It's kind of like Patreon, but not a Patreon, right? People know what Patreon is, but it's our Patreon, but it's not on Patreon.
It's technically not a Patreon, but it's like it.
It's like it.
Yeah.
It's like I always described Patreon with, like, Shakespeare had patrons. He wrote his plays because he had patrons, or something like that. So we're looking for patrons on our website, evangelicalish.com, and we appreciate all of you who support and love our work. All right, April, kick us off.
So we've got a really cool, fun guest tonight. We're going to talk about ableism in the church, but our guest tonight, her name is Elora Dodd, and she is online one-room schoolhouse on TikTok and Instagram. And I think your bio says, like, the autistic girl with the comedy, because she's got really, really funny videos. So welcome, Elora.
Yeah, no, someone once commented on my video or something like, "Oh, it's you, the autistic girl with the comedy, like, remembered me from something else." And then I just made that my bio and I forgot to change it. So
I like it. It's the autistic girl with the comedy. It reminds me of, like, when older people call it the Facebook, which I'm not calling you old, but it's fun.
That was its original name, right?
Was it the Facebook originally?
The Facebook, if you watch Social Network,
yeah.
It was the big moment where they went from the Facebook to just Facebook.
Well, it was originally supposed to just be for colleges. Like, I remember when I first signed up for Facebook, I had to use my college email address.
Right.
That's how old I am.
Justin Timberlake played the guy who invented Napster, and he was the one that said, "Drop just be Facebook."
Yeah, it was a good life choice for what's his face, Zuckerberg, good old Mark. Anyway, Elora,
he's made a couple of dollars off that. And by the way, Donald Trump will be back on Facebook soon. Yay. So we're looking forward.
I saw that. Okay, this is totally sidebar, but I did see that there is a stat of, like, the wealth and the baby boomers in America have, like, at least 50% of the wealth, maybe even more than that. Like, they've got the biggest chunk as far as a generation of the wealth. Millennials have 4% of the wealth, and 2% of that, so half of the 4%, is Mark Zuckerberg. Oof. So millennials have 4%, but half of that is Mark Zuckerberg. So really, the rest of us only have 2% of all of the wealth in America for millennials.
Wow. And this has nothing to do with you, Elora, but jump in on it. But what generation is Bezos then? Is he an Xer or
Gen X? He's older, right? I don't know. I've never looked up which generation Jeff Bezos is, surprisingly.
I've got my tablet here. You want me to do it?
We'll let the reader look, or the reader.
Elon and Bezos.
Special side quest.
How old is he?
Evangelicalish homework.
Yeah. Anyway, That's totally not what we're talking about tonight.
No.
Jeff Bezos is 59, so
that would make him a boomer.
that makes him a boomer?
Yeah, because I'm 57, and that makes me the oldest Xer. I am as old as you can be in the X.
So he's a baby boomer.
Yeah, he's
like the
almost the youngest boomer you can be. So and there are occasionally ones that say I'm a boomer, I'm the youngest boomer, and I'm like, hell no, I will not be a boomer. No fucking chance.
You name it and claim it. I am not a boomer. You don't have the spirit of a boomer, Paul.
Okay. I'm not a Karen. There we go.
Yes. Okay, so Elora, we want to talk to you and hear about your story, grow a little bit of your background, what kind of church you grew up in and what that was like. Especially being autistic and some of the experiences that you had in the church.
And how did you become the autistic girl with the comedy?
Yeah.
Okay, so I grew up pretty far right. I wasn't Duggar or anything. I could wear skirts and all, but I didn't think I was that far right until I started deconstructing and meeting a lot of people who weren't raised in the church at all, and I was like, oh, I think I was.
Yeah.
Comparing yourself to other Southern Baptists, you're like, I'm not that far.
So you grew up SBC?
Yeah, I grew up Southern Baptist, went to the same church all my life, was dedicated as a baby when I was not even a week old, which was just like a convenient schedule. They scheduled like baby dedications, and they had one right after I was birthed, so that worked out.
And you live in Oklahoma now. Did you grow up in Oklahoma?
Yeah, same town my whole life. Well, except for college. And so I grew up spending a lot of time in a really conservative homeschool group with kids who were a lot closer to the Duggars than me, which is part of why I thought I wasn't that conservative. I was like, she can't even wear pants. And my whole life I struggled a lot with making friends, understanding how to fit in. I kept making these little mistakes that really alienated me from everyone around me, and I was trying my best, but it really felt like I constantly was not getting it right. And a lot of mental health problems, constantly being the odd one out who didn't have friends, constantly just being an outsider. And when I went to college, I remember thinking, I'm going to figure it out this time. I'm starting fresh. It won't happen again. Well, it got way worse because I got these really good scholarships to this school in Tulsa called Oral Roberts University.
Oh, yeah.
Founded by
the statue of the hands, right?
Yeah, the praying hands.
And so I didn't even have to take out loans. See, I wanted to do like performing arts. And you know what they tell you when you're a performing artist and you're Christian high schooler, they're like, you got to be careful what school you go to because they're going to want to make you do pole dancing and sing Rihanna. Like I'm paraphrasing, but that's the idea. I got warned by a lot of people, you got to be careful. You want to dance in college? And I've been taking ballet classes since I was 2. This is a part of my life that very, very core to my identity and just to what I like to do. And they're like, you got to be careful. They're going to make you put on those skimpy bikini outfits and dance. You're going to have to audition for like Chicago and stuff. I was really worried. I was worried. Like I had these conversations with myself. Like, would I be willing to get expelled to avoid having to perform in Chicago, the musical? Like that sort of thing. Like we'd want to honor God. And so I got a bunch of good scholarships to Oral Roberts University, just 3 hours from my hometown. And I didn't even have to take out loans. And they had a dance program. And I was like, yes, almost no Christian schools have dance programs. They might have like dance as exercise at 8 in the gym, but I was like, yes, this is happening. Pro tip, if you're disabled, do not ever do anything that has the name Oral Roberts attached to it.
Oof.
He's famous for being a healer.
Yeah.
Oh.
If you had faith, right? If you had faith, you wouldn't have that disability.
Yeah, no, I pretty much I had some bad mental breakdown my first year and ended up in a psych ward. Went home, took a semester off, started training my own service dog. So I came back to campus. He was trained enough to go around college with me. This I will say for Oral Roberts University, they did not ask him to be fully trained to be on campus. So, and no one really cared. Like everyone was like, yeah, dog. You know, talking to a room full of college students who are just like peeling their eyes off, trying to stay awake to study for an exam with a dog. Literally, the dog could pee on them and they wouldn't be mad. Like some, but a lot of. Now he was already pretty well behaved, but he had some issues we were still working out. You know, training takes a while. The thing was, as much as people loved having a little 25-pound spaniel bouncing around the campus, it was like all the love they had for him was taken away from me. Is what it felt.
Oh, wow.
Like I was not worthy of respect or honor anymore. Caspian, my service dog, was. Caspian was the belle of the ball, but I was ground zero for every wannabe faith healer in all of northern Oklahoma.
Oof.
Oh, no.
Saw me and narrowed in, and it wasn't just me. Two of my closest friends while on campus there used wheelchairs, and that was its own thing.
You might as well had a target painted on them, right?
Still not used to it though. It was its own thing. Insert your favorite expletive there. People would come up to me and say, hey, I know you have a service dog. What's he for? No name or anything. Just like, please give me your medical diagnoses. And I'd try to, because I had like this attitude of like, I'm going to tell them. I didn't know I was autistic then. I'll get to that part. But I did know I was having serious mental health issues from like always feeling like an outsider my whole life. And I didn't know how to fix it. And so I'd say, yeah, I have like depression and anxiety and stuff. And he helps me with panic attacks, which I now know are autistic meltdowns. But the fact remains, I actually took things that dogs can be trained for to help autistic people and trained him in those. And I was like, I'm not autistic, but he's kind of being trained in how to help an autistic person because I'm innovative and think of good ideas.
Wow.
Makes more sense now. So they would come up to me often in times of groups of 2, 3, even like 6 or 7 and asked to pray for me. And I knew from a comment someone else had made that I was the girl with the dog. Everyone already knew who I was. I already had a reputation and I was already having trouble getting accommodations from the school. It wasn't like they were turning me down for accommodations so much as I would suggest accommodations I needed. And they'd say, well, you know, we only want you to take the ones you absolutely have to have, which for the record is a terrible attitude. It's saying pretty much get as close as you can to failing. Only take the help you absolutely have to have. So it's essentially pushing you to your farthest. And you could learn better, thrive better, become a better student with just a little more help. But I didn't see it that way at the time. I was just like, yeah, I'm tough. I'm a strong, independent woman, and I will make you. And so anyway, I was like, I don't want to get in trouble with the school if I have a bad reputation. So essentially, I did not feel like I could say no. Technically, they would ask, but there was this attitude, very much a culture of you want to get healed, and you say no, that means you don't actually have faith in Jesus. So my reputation would be very badly damaged. It would affect my education and my standing with the school if I said no. So essentially, I would leave my apartment, and it got to the point where I would avoid leaving my apartment. I would avoid leaving my room because so many people would grab me. And when I say grab me, I mean, they say, at ORU, it's a very charismatic culture, even though it's technically non-denominational. And the idea is we're all going to lay hands on you. If a group of 7 people comes up to you wanting to lay hands on you, that's 14 hands. I on the side of my thigh, the back of my neck, holding on to my ears and pinching them, kneeling down on the ground and grasping my ankles with both hands in a vice. It was traumatic. Maybe as I could not leave my bedroom without people touching me. And I wasn't allowed to, and when I say touching me, we're talking about the small of my back. Literally anywhere that is not a crime was fair game. And I never really had warning. People would just approach me.
Elora, can I jump in real quick? Like, is it, just give us education here. Like, one thing I know is when somebody has a service dog, you should not, you know, the service dog is working, right? You're not to like go pet it or at least ask permission, right? And it's not really up to anybody with the service dog or to tell you what their challenge is, right? I mean, you don't need to be telling people all the time, and certainly touching without permission is not good. Yeah, just fill us in a little bit around.
I didn't go into the whole service dog thing for two reasons. Number one is it's very much a problem outside of the church, and we're talking about ableism in the church. The grabbing people's inner thighs so you can bless them with Jesus is more of a unique to Christianity thing that I don't usually get from other people. And the second thing is, I'm really sorry to bring everyone down, but my service dog passed away unexpectedly this training. So I dropped out of school because of the harassment and the constant fear and the fact that I genuinely did not know if I was going to survive school. My mental health was so bad that I was like, I could be a week away from suicide at any point.
Oh my gosh. You cut out just for a second. Did you say that the dog passed away right as you finished the training? So early?
Yeah. Oh, he was a breed that is known for being extremely affectionate, kind, cuddly, like the ultimate lap dog. Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. And he really dropped into my life. I'm certain that it was like a this is going to trigger someone with this phrase, but it was a God thing. It was a God thing. No, I really do think that God sent me that dog because he did save my life. I don't know if I would have survived until now if I didn't have him to help me get through all those meltdowns. I didn't know were meltdowns.
By the way, I'm a big believer. Praying for somebody without their permission is abuse. Like, praying for somebody is spiritually connecting yourself to them. And if you don't have permission, if you don't have consent, let's say, it is abuse to pray for somebody without their permission to pray for them, in my view.
I mean, I'm kind of the view that, like, if you're keeping it to yourself, I don't care. If you just see me walking by in the parking lot and you're like, that woman looks like she could use some blessing, and you whisper like, Jesus, help her. I'll take all the Jesus I can helpers I can get. I'll take them all. But the moment you start approaching someone, it becomes not just a spiritual interaction, but a social interaction. And you need to, the fact that it's a social interaction and a spiritual one, the spiritual doesn't negate the social. It's not like you can say whatever you want and it won't hurt if it's spiritually involved. So I'll take all the silent prayers, but the moment you tell me you're praying for me, it becomes a interpersonal interaction, and I expect to be treated with respect.
Can I ask you, when you were going through this and people kept coming up to you, laying hands on you and praying for you, you know, I don't know if they're saying things like, you know, you just need more faith or whatever they were saying, but what was going on in your head? Did you believe them, or did you kind of know deep down that something was off?
What was going on in my head was, I think, a certain level of disassociation. Literally, like, my brain was turning off. I was like, these people are grabbing the inside of my thigh, and I just want to get some lunch. It was awful. But also, like, I knew it was crap. I knew this was not biblical at all. I was like, this is just not nice. It's not fair. I really tried at ORU. I tried to form a club to support disabled students. I tried to plan an event. I tried to get meetings with people and to talk about important things. I was doing activism on campus while I was constantly at risk of harming myself because of the mental health situation being so bad. And also, I should add, ORU has this attitude of whole person wellness. Whole person, that's their motto. And by that, they mean that they don't want to just teach people academics. They want to encourage them to be physically healthy, emotionally healthy, mentally healthy, etc. as well. The problem with that is that the way they implement that is less by providing resources to build yourself up in those areas and more by providing expectations. I had to run I think it was 2 miles, might have been like 2 miles or something, in front of an entire class of people every semester. And we trained for it. So it's like 4 or 5 times, 6, 7 times a semester. I'm running 2.5 miles in front of all my friends. And no, they're not just friends. Some of them are like athletes and they're ripped and they're just like running really long. Like you ever watch Mickey Mouse cartoons and Goofy's got this really long leg span. He can just woo. Yeah, like that, just woo. And I'm over here and I'm like at my limit. I'm autistic and I don't know it. So I'm already super overwhelmed by all the noise in the gym. I can barely hear my teacher and it's taking a bunch of energy. You know, it feels like a rave. The clothes are slipping the whole time. I you know, because there's modesty standards. So I couldn't wear short shorts that felt good. I had to wear longer leggings that were going up and down the whole time, just driving me wild. And I would have meltdowns while running and I couldn't stop. So essentially I'm running by and I'm sobbing and I feel like I'm going to throw up. It was really humiliating.
Oh my gosh.
For example, we all had to measure our BMI in front of each other, that sort of thing. No one else got to see the weight on the scale, but we all had to get weighed in front of each other, that sort of thing. You know, and this was in health class that you had to take every semester. It's always. You could change which health class you took. You know, the lucky people got to go do like horseback riding outside of the city, you know, but that class always filled up just in an instant.
Yeah.
So, the school, I tried my best to change things. I tried my best to support people. There are plenty of times I walked out of chapel. We had chapel twice a week and you could miss it a grand total of twice in a semester before you got in trouble.
Wow.
The noise was so loud, it was enough to send people into like meltdowns. And it got to the point where there was a little cluster of disabled students in the lobby constantly. There was one girl who had asthma and she had to leave and sometimes grab her inhaler because of all the smoke machines.
Oh my gosh.
Jesus. There were people out there overwhelmed by the noise. There was a blind woman who the noise was so loud. She was worried about damaging her hearing. She needs that. That's what she's got left.
Right.
Sorry, that's the sensitive way to say it. But I think that's how she would say it. I don't think she'd care. I know her. We haven't talked in a while, but.
How long were you at? Oh yeah, go ahead.
More to give you the idea. I had a friend who had joint issues and the bass was so loud it shook her bones and put her in pain. That sort of thing. And not to mention like the sensory overload. So a lot of times there would be people like bent over in pain, sucking on inhalers or whatever. I'm there on the floor sobbing, my dog lying on top of me, trying to give me pressure like a weighted blanket. And that was kind of normal.
Yeah.
So
how long were you at ORU total?
2 years. I took a semester off, but it was like 2 years.
Okay. And then when were you officially diagnosed with autism? How old were you?
I dropped out of school because I'd done my best to change things and it wasn't working and I wanted to survive. And I felt like such a failure. And I pretty much, what I know now is autistic burnout. My brain had just done as much as it could. And it was at the point where like I couldn't help my family with the dishes without having a whole autistic meltdown. Like my brain was at zero. I pretty much just sat around and ate and slept, barely even showered. It was really bad. And then I started content creating because the pandemic happened and I really wanted to be useful. So I started doing history videos because so many families were at home with their kids. And I thought I can do a daily history live stream on Facebook. It was really fun. And then I started making TikToks of history, Instagram. And then I started making comedy videos in there and realized I liked that more. And now it's my full-time job. But in that process, I pushed myself to get on different social media platforms, and I ended up connecting with a lot of disabled people online and finding out that the issues I was dealing with were not so abstract, not so unknowable as I thought they were. And there's a word for it, and it's autism. You know? But like I got $20,000 plus a year at school scholarships for being smart. I mean, that's not it really. It's because I got good test scores. But on paper, it looks like you're smart. Personally, I'd say that test scores aren't the best way to measure intelligence, but that's fine. Like I wasn't trying to be like super arrogant. Like I do things. I am capable and strong. I can't be autistic, I say as I'm lying in my room I haven't cleaned in 3 years. And so I found out I was autistic just by hearing other people tell their stories. And it just was this pattern for a few months of just being like, this person knows me better than my best friend. Oh, wait, they're autistic? Weird. That's so. And then eventually I brought all my evidence to my therapist, who's also a psychologist. And she tested me and gave me an official diagnosis. She's like, yes.
So I'm sorry to ask you to educate us, but you're here to talk about it. So tell us what is autism and kind of what were the manifestations of it in your life that helped you to know this was something you were dealing with.
Okay, awesome. What is autism? That's not a question at all. Autism is a different brain structure. A lot of people see it as a glitch in the brain. Frankly, that's incorrect and sometimes very prejudiced, depending on. It's normal to have misconceptions about autism. I don't judge people for not knowing things, but some people don't understand autism and some people are grifters who make a lot of money off of people not understanding autism. So I don't want anyone to think when I say like strong things about what I think and know about autism that I'm like getting mad at the average Joe. I'm not. I'm getting mad at major corporations. Sorry if you're listening to this. I just made that face. The autism face. It's like you just inhaled a cockroach and it crawled up into your sinuses. That's the autism speaks face. We don't have time to go into that group. That's beside the point. Okay, so a lot of people will see autism as like a glitch in the brain, but it's more of a different operating system. Imagine if everyone in the world had an Apple cell phone, and then you get a cell phone and it's an Android and you can't download any of the apps, and everyone looks at your phone and says, dude, I think it's broken. It's not broken, but you're still kind of screwed. That's what it's like being autistic. I love who I am. I love being different. I love that my brain works differently, processes things differently, and is capable of different things. Doesn't change the fact that I'm screwed. I mean, I think society as a whole has been built on the idea that everyone thinks a specific way, experiences the world a specific way, and we're entering a new era where people are really considering that everyone has different brains. I mean, think about just the basic introvert versus extrovert. People are expressing how they experience socialization. Think about all these personality tests everyone's obsessed with. I mean, even going on BuzzFeed and being like, am I a cinnamon Pop-Tart or blueberry? I don't know. I didn't live in past generations, but the impression I get is that this is kind of new. People wanting to explore their brains and how they work. And so it's a great era for autism to get recognized and start having autistics creating community, because we've always been here. I always say autism didn't just snap into existence the moment it was discovered, any more than gravity snapped into existence when Isaac Newton noticed it. Okay, people will talk about autism epidemic. It's not an epidemic. We've always been here. We just got burned at the stake, and now we're not doing that anymore, and it's great. Awesome. I love not being burned at the stake. And people will look back and be like, back in my day, these kids didn't have ADHD and autism. Like, you're right, because no one knew what they were. Or people had just started noticing them and they didn't know that much about them yet. Like, this is always how science works, okay?
Well, and back in those days, people believed being left-handed was evil.
Yes.
So.
You look at a graph of how many people are left-handed, and suddenly it goes way up when stopped having their wrists broken by the nuns for being left-handed.
Yes.
The same thing is happening with autism right now. We're entering an era where people are actually talking about, yeah, I went to my therapist. My therapist's great. A few decades ago, that would have been a very ostracizing experience to talk publicly about going to your therapist. Nowadays, my generation, we're just like, oh my goodness, my therapist is great. She's so alternative. And someone else would be like, my therapist is like really serious, but in a good way. People talk about their therapist. It's fun. So we're entering an era where people are actually feeling free to explore how their brain works. And that's good. It's good that people are finding out they're autistic. It's not an epidemic. We're just identifying things that we didn't really have the freedom to identify before.
Was there, when you found out like officially that yes, you did get the diagnosis that you were autistic, were you kind of, was it like a good feeling in the sense that you finally had an understanding of why your life and how you, like, why you thought differently and why you felt different?
Yeah, absolutely. It was like being told it's not your fault, except about like 10 million things at once. Is like it's a massive experience sorting through all that past trauma.
Yeah.
Realizing that a lot of the experiences I had, especially in the church growing up, I wasn't being a sinful, horrible person.
Yeah.
I was just being me. It's hard. And I think a lot of people in the comments, whether they're autistic or not, understand the concept of like, they probably haven't put words to it, but there's Mary girls and then there's everyone else girls. You know, when the nativity production comes every year, there's the ones who are Marys and there's the ones who's demon number 3.
Or a sheep.
Mary girls are very conventionally sociable. They socialize in all the normal ways. They have a certain level of privilege from their parents. Like their parents are always driving them to be there. You know, bus kids aren't there often enough to be considered Mary. They're usually pretty and they're usually skinny. Of course, this is just from my experience. Remember, I've always been to one church and we didn't do nativity productions. But from what I've heard from many other people and seen in my own church in our similar experiences, there are married girls and then there's everyone else. And if you're autistic, chances are you are automatically everyone else. And so, but you don't have to be autistic to have that experience of knowing subconsciously, it's never put into words, but knowing subconsciously that your personality makes you less holy. It's not stated that way, but there's just this understanding that the image of perfect holy womanhood will never ever be you. Maybe that's because of the way you look, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic background, the way you socialize, whatever. But it's not specifically stated. You're just given the impression over years and years and years of seeing who gets put up on that pedestal. And you know that you're not quite holy enough and it's in your DNA. And that's really crushing.
Yeah.
Autism in interaction with people, and I have a couple of friends who are on the spectrum of autism, as am I in some ways, but it is part of the issue that it makes for socially awkward interactions. Is that fair to say? At least that's what one of my friends is.
Let's not skate over that.
Yeah.
You just said you're on the spectrum in some ways.
Well, I am diagnosed with DID, and so I'm told there is a spectrum of autism to DID.
There's a lot of overlap, but
yeah,
that's different.
Okay.
Sorry, I just mean that there's a lot of mental conditions that overlap a lot with autism, where a lot of people will have both. But they're not all one continuing spectrum.
Okay.
I don't mean to like be rude. That's just a common misconception. I wanted to sort out.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
No, because it is a thing that autistics hear a lot, and I just wanted to sort out for the viewers, because a lot of times people will tell someone I am autistic and they'll say we're all a bit autistic, and by that what they mean is I'm not gonna give you any help ever, because we're all just gonna pretend we all feel the same way, which I know is not what you were saying at all, but that's one of those things. There are certain phrases that I feel the need to clarify.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's not a nice thing to say, but the way to respond to it, if someone says we're all a bit autistic, is to say, and how are you autistic, Michelle? And then they get a little awkward about it. Sorry about that. I hope that didn't crush your spirit. I don't know what is it. I don't know how to respond to that.
Yeah. So how does it impact your social interaction with people, and is that part of how it gets mistreated in the church and in other places?
Yeah, absolutely. People assume that if you're not socializing the way they do, that's because you're rude and awful. Autistics tend to see the world in more blunt, black and white. So if they don't like you, they might just say, hey, I'd rather hang out with someone else. And to an autistic, that might just be like saying the truth. Sorry, I burped. That's what I get for eating food. An autistic might skip small talk and go straight to talking about bees. And someone else might think, oh my goodness, they're super weird. They've been talking about bees for 40 minutes. I think the typical neurotypical average brain person, communications are more like a seesaw. One person says a little something and the other person says a little something and the other person. A lot of times autistic communication relies more on this thing called info dumping, and it's actually an autistic love language where you just like vomit up information at each other, and it's a sign of love. That's great. If you're in a room, and as autistics are getting community online, finding each other, talking about these things, I've seen it become more common for people to just say, hey, can I info dump at you? Just a polite little ask. And then the other person will be like, yeah, absolutely. And they'd be like, okay, in 1492, Columbus set across the ocean in the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And they just go into whatever they're interested in. And it can be anything. But if you do that in church, people will say you're monopolizing the conversation, you're being super rude, you're making it all about you, you're not interacting appropriately, you're making other people uncomfortable, even if that's like a love language where you're showing how much you care about the subject and the people involved. That's not to say I've never been rude or whatever in my life, but it's taught my basic love languages, my basic ways of connecting with people are categorized as sinful to an extent.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong at speculating this, but I think especially as growing up as a female in the church, like they expect the women to kind of be people pleasers already and to say yes and to be to be ladylike, quote unquote. So I'm wondering if like, even just for any woman to be, quote unquote abrasive, really just being honest is looked at a negative thing. Would you think like you being female and autistic might have, been a double whammy?
Yeah. So there's an entire, like, you can go down a really deep rabbit hole about the intersection of what gender you're socialized as and how likely you are to get diagnosed as autistic. There was a while they even thought only boys can be autistic. A lot of people did. That's just a massive subject. But in short, yes.
Okay.
Just that you could do an entire Netflix series about that. My goodness. But yeah, girls are kind of expected to be held to different standards. For example, autistics need to stim. Stimming is some kind of movement or it's some kind of input in your senses. It can be what you smell, what you see. A lot of times it's proprioceptive, the way you move. and it helps your brain do the thinking. Now, we all do it. We've all had those times when we're just so overwhelmed, we get up and we pace around the kitchen. We've all had those times we're so stressed, we start biting our nails. It's natural to use movement of some kind to help our brains work, but autistics need it at a much higher level. So, you know, these are the kids who are spinning around the classroom nonstop, and that's how they learn their math. But you tell them to sit down, they can't learn the math. And then they're like, look at this badly behaved child.
Yeah.
Will never sit still. No, sitting still is how they learn. I mean, is not how they learn. The movement is part of the thought. That's an example of just one of many aspects of autism. But how is it perceived in boys versus girls? A boy runs around the house rolling his toy cars on the walls, or let's say the church, since we're talking about church, and they're like, look at that. He's just full of life, just so full of life. A little girl does that. And it's like, honey, you need to be like, honey, no, you're going to mess up your nice dress. You're going to mess up your nice dress. You sit down. So one very important concept you learn about when you're talking about autism is masking, which is being able to cover your autistic traits to protect yourself. And that's a lot of why I wasn't diagnosed. I was super, super weird, but I learned to contain it to a certain degree so that I wouldn't get completely kicked out of every interaction. But it didn't make me healthier. It didn't make me normal. It was like, we've all heard about customer service voice, right? Imagine if you had to do customer service voice 24/7 with everyone you loved, or else they'd be disappointed in you and feel like you were messing up somehow.
Yeah.
Like you could talk to your mom or your best friend to the point where you had to do customer service voice with yourself. That the way you talk, move, think, act, it's all based on this fake persona to the point where you don't even know who you are. Something a lot of autistics experience. And definitely something I experienced. And now working from home as a social media creator, I can unmask constantly. I do so much of my job while pacing around. You watch my videos, I'm walking while I do them. I am stimming nonstop all day. I couldn't do that in an office. So I am thriving in ways I was never able to before. But also, those aren't really ways you can thrive in church a lot of the time. Church is very focused on sit still. And pay attention. And one thing I've noticed a lot in these stories we received, because I did ask for stories from some of my followers about religious experiences, and religious trauma related to disability and health, is the idea that if you can't focus, it means you don't love God enough. Our brains sometimes need different things to focus. Some people need a super quiet, calm room to focus, and some people need a trampoline. And people, a lot of times I'm seeing in these stories, are saying that they thought that they must not love God enough because they couldn't pay attention in a freaking boring church service full of boring people. That's not spirituality. That's humanity. Some people are boring as heck. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is.
Especially the ones that are just like really monotone. And then Jesus came in and like don't ever influctuate their voice at all.
And even the most amazing orator of a pastor is boring after 50 minutes at least, maybe 40 minutes. If you preach an hour and a half, stop.
Yeah, I like what Paul in the comments said, and that it's unique to the person too. If you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. I think that's true for like so many different things. People are unique.
Autism is a different kind of brain structure. It's not a personality type. Just because two people are autistic doesn't mean they'll like each other. Doesn't mean they'll like each other. They might understand each other more than other people, but I know some autistics would be super overwhelmed by any noise in church. And some autistics, I'm sure, would need some kind of noise to focus. Like our brains all work differently, just like all neurotypical people's brains work differently. Like imagine, April, you're neurotypical to the best of my understanding, right?
I believe so, as far as I know. Yes.
So imagine if you said, like, tell me something you enjoy in church, anything, something that helps you focus or makes it better.
Like during the sermon or at any point?
Any point, just anything.
I've always enjoyed the music the most. And
Okay.
just like, yeah.
So what if I said to you, you like music in church, but I know this other person who isn't autistic and she doesn't like music in church. Are you sure you're not autistic? Because I've met other not autistics and they don't like music. So I'm pretty, like, that's how people talk to autistics sometimes. It's like, I'm not a monolith. I don't represent
It's so condescending too. Like, people would know your like health diagnosis better than you.
Yeah, no, this is such a vast subject. I can't even.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We are 45 minutes into this broadcast, so we should go to a mid-roll, and then when we come back, let's try to go into the stories that your followers sent you.
Loving Evangelical-ish? Follow us to catch all the latest content and encouragement. You can check us out on TikTok by following @Evangelical-ish or subscribe on YouTube by searching Evangelical-ish. That's Evangelical with an ISH. And don't forget to catch our live streams each and every single Wednesday night on YouTube at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, and 6 Pacific. And now, back to the Evangelical-ish podcast.
Okay. Welcome back. This is the quickest break ever. Okay, so why don't you?
We should remind everybody Jeremy's not with us tonight. He's on dad duty, so we're missing Jeremy tonight. And
yes, we said that, right? We didn't.
We did, but I'm just
okay.
People may pop in from in and out, and I did want to ask you, Laura, is it snowing in Oklahoma today, or?
It snowed a couple days ago, but the snow melted mostly today.
Okay.
At least where I am.
Okay, so kind of explain what you asked of your followers a couple days ago, and then talk about just like generally the response, and then we can get into some of the specifics.
Okay, so I thought individual stories can be very powerful. I wanted to talk to people about times that they've experienced ableism in the church. And I remember telling you too, when we were in our brief planning meeting, this is such a massive subject. It could have its own podcast. We could write a book. Like, we are barely scratching the surface at all. I've told you a few of my own stories. And even then I could have kept those stories going on for another 20 minutes talking about the nuance, each of them.
Yeah.
We are really skating through. And if any people are watching who are like autistic or disabled themselves and they want to add stuff in, I would really encourage you to put it in the chat, because there's no way I can say it all. So if you think I'm missing something, I probably am, and you are more than welcome to add to the conversation. Okay, but I asked my followers on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram if they would like me to read a story aloud for them about their own experiences. And I got dozens upon dozens of experiences of really often very traumatic, terrible, awful experiences that people have had that are unique to religion and disability or health problems, ways that the church has just failed disabled people and people with health problems. And it just goes on and on and on. I'm having trouble even forming sentences right now. I don't know how to express how much I received. I received an email just like an hour ago when we were getting ready to go. People are still sending in their stories. I haven't even opened some of the emails, and I am so sorry if I haven't gotten to yours yet. It's just that there are so many. I will be responding to you. I've seen these stories. I've seen that there is a big demand now for people to share their stories. They want to be heard, and they want to make other people know that they're not alone. There's a lot of power in your story. So if you sent in a story to me, please know. I really appreciate it. I'm going to try to find a way to share these stories outside of these podcasts, because we cannot get to many. Yeah. I'm thinking about starting a YouTube series where I read these, and I will be in contact with people. I'll be sending you emails if and when I'm ready for that, just to make sure you know what your story would be used for, and you can give your permission or decline to be involved in that. So to summarize, for everyone who sent in a story, thank you so much. We cannot get to many tonight, but I'm committed to sharing your stories if you want them to be shared. We'll get them out there eventually. Yeah. Okay, April, say something, because I forgot what the sentences are.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it's hard to summarize so many people's individual stories. Elora sent us some to pick one too, which was really hard to do. But I think and I picked one that I do want to share specifically, but I think an overall theme was just a lot of people that had needs that were not met, and those people were demonized for them, sometimes
Mhm.
quite literally. Um, and it's the sphere of the unknown, and there was a very consistent, you just need Jesus, just pray about it, just have faith, because people, especially mental health issues, you know I mean any physical disability too, but they just they don't, if they can't see it, it's like, oh, it's just literally in your head, and you just need to pray about it, and you just need more Jesus. Or if it is something physical, then they think it's like this open invitation to, just like Elora, like to lay hands, and to
Mhm.
honestly, some of them were a little triggering for me, just because my dad had cancer, which is a disease. But when he had cancer, it was like everybody and their mom that had ever been in contact with our family's ministry wanted to come to the hospital where my dad was. And he was, from diagnosis to when he died, was 4 months, because he was very late stage. But everyone wanted to come in, and it was like this competition over who could say the most powerful prayer, and who would be the one that got the glorious healing prayer. And it was just got sick to my stomach. It just felt like a circus after a while. And then when he did die, everyone had all the faith. We had all the faith in the world. We really thought my dad was going to be healed. But then when he passed, we were the ones blamed. Like, God didn't heal him because we just didn't have enough faith. He was living out of God's will, you know, just victim blaming.
Yeah, it's
And
never
right,
it all-
it could never be God's fault.
the dentist. Maybe his dentist didn't have enough faith. Maybe no, everyone got to pray, but whose fault was it? Not the people who were praying.
Yeah, which I know cancer is obviously different than mental health and like disability and what we're talking about.
No.
But
Isn't it weird, by the way, that if we get a good parking spot at the mall, we have to be grateful to God, but if somebody in our family gets a disease, that's not God's fault. That is man's fault.
But if you say that God lets things happen without controlling every single thing, then you're a deist, like Thomas Jefferson, and that's a problem. God has to be in control of everything, but he can't be responsible for everything.
Yeah.
Very interesting. My faith has evolved so much through the past.
I keep waiting for the day. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Laura. When some football player at the end of a game says, we would have won if Jesus hadn't made me fumble. Jesus didn't help me not fumble, so we lost the game. Thanks, Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for
the day
that
that's
happens.
Hilarious. They thank God for the wins. Yeah, the losers are never blaming God. I should make a TikTok about that. That's
Jesus. I was just thinking the same thing. Both.
No, you do it. That's your idea. You take that.
All right, let me write that down. If Jesus hadn't made me fumble, or at least kept me from fumbling.
A big part of my development of my faith over the last few years has just been accepting that people suck. Mm-hmm. and bad things can happen and good things can happen, and I don't need to find a spiritual reason for everything. It's like I can believe that God is out there and he's good and he's great, and I can also believe that sometimes things just happen, and I don't need to make every single thing line up in like some sort of spreadsheet. Like, okay, where's God's plan in this? We gotta assign, is this judgment? Is this trial? Is this testing? You don't have to check a box for every single thing that happens in your life. You can still believe in God and not try to figure out his motivation for everything.
Yeah. I want to share this story real quick and I'll summarize, but this woman, she's in her 30s now, and in the last 2 years she was diagnosed with both autism and DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, which we didn't really talk about that. We've talked about DID before, but DID is basically if you have consistent childhood trauma or abuse, your brain kind of splits into multiple parts. It used to be called multiple personality disorder, but now it's DID. So anyway, she's now diagnosed with that, which means she had these back then or just had a very rough childhood. And she says she could write novels of the shit that happened to her between her and the church, but that she'll stick with this one that she was at summer church camp and they were having the night sermon. They were covering demons and possession in the sermon. She started to not feel well, a headache and such, so she goes outside for some fresh air. She thinks she was in the middle of a switch, which would be I think that would be switching altars, which she wouldn't have known at the time. And she just started shaking her head and feeling confused, trying to collect herself. And one of the staff started talking to me, and since she was already feeling kind of confused and overwhelmed, she went into a panic and fell into a nonverbal state. That can happen. That's happened to her a lot in her life. Well, this person at the camp was convinced that she was demon possessed and yelled for others to come outside. But since she was in a nonverbal state, she could not communicate. And everyone started grabbing her, laying hands on her, shaking her head, and praying for almost 2 hours for the demons to release her. Until she eventually passed out for about 30 seconds. And when she came to, she could talk when she came to. She says she thinks her brain overloaded and just kind of reset. That everyone started celebrating and was over the moon about how they had all come together as a community to quote unquote save her. It was a horrible experience. And when I tried to tell the medical staff about it the next day, she goes, she wrote this, I'll say it. She said, I fucking knew I didn't have a demon in me. And I tried to explain my state of mind and physical symptoms, and I was totally ignored because, quote, evil did not win last night, so you need to focus on staying pure, end quote. She was 12 years old when this happened. And that makes me think of, like, I don't know if y'all have seen this one chick. I mean, there's a lot of videos going around in Pentecostal services of people laying hands on people, claiming that they have demons, that they're casting demons out. And there's just so much ignorance of like what goes on in a brain, and it's just automatically labeled a demon in these services. And like these people are literally demonized. And I can't imagine what that does to your psyche as a 12-year-old, having grown adults telling you, oh, you had a demon last night, when you like know in your head that you didn't, but no one is believing what you're saying.
Yeah. One thing I see a lot being part of the disabled community is the idea of a catch-all or a cure-all. And I think there's a natural human desire to have something that promises that you'll be okay and bad things will never happen to you. And for some people, that's the idea of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you just work hard enough, you'll get where you want to be. You'll have the money you want. And if you're already a privileged person, you can lean back on that bootstraps idea and say, well, you know, there isn't this massive injustice in the world that I need to fix. I just worked hard. You know, it's a comforting way to avoid the idea that, yeah, you could be next. You could fall from your place of comfort and the world isn't as bad as it feels. And so for other people, maybe someone's in an MLM and they believe that if you just join this MLM, you're going to get rich and prosperous. And if you use these essential oils or diet shake or whatever, you're going to be perfectly healthy and you're never going to get sick. And for other people, it's their workout. They're a gym rat and they just go all the time. And they're like, I have so much muscle mass. Bad things won't happen to me. And it's not necessarily a conscious thought, but it's like the way that they live their life is the idea that there's something that makes them invincible. And then when you see a disabled person who's good and kind, it ruins your life raft. That one thing that you've been holding on to promise yourself that bad things will never happen to you. And it'll never be you. It won't be you. All those stories you hear on the news, it can't be your kid. It can't be your mom. It will never be your family. It ruins it. Yeah. And so disabled people end up as the target of a lot of people who aren't really thinking through what they're saying, oh, I see that you're in a wheelchair. You're in Target. Have you tried yoga? That's actually a really common thing for people to be targeted, like I was at school. Maybe they don't lay hands on you, but they've always got something. Their diet, their exercise, their philosophy of life, whatever it is. And the message is, You're the problem. You're hurting. You're struggling. You've been oppressed or betrayed or just having a bad day. And maybe you just broke your ankle and can't keep balance on crutches. And that's why you're using a wheelchair in Walmart. I don't know. Maybe it's just a temporary thing. But for whatever reason, people decide that it's your fault because that's the only way that they can cope with the reality that life isn't fair. So and I think we see this in religious circles a lot of times as demons and other times as lack of faith. And often they'll combine those two, but it's lack of faith, or you just need to pray in the specific way, like in tongues or something, or it's demons. It's inside the church and it's outside the church.
Yeah.
We as Americans are programmed to not like being uncomfortable. We have a lot of comfort, and so when somebody makes us uncomfortable, we have to come with the solution and the fix. And even in my therapy group I've been in this year, like they taught us, when somebody's crying, don't hand them a Kleenex, because sometimes that is you being uncomfortable with them crying, and handing them a Kleenex is saying, hey, would you stop making me uncomfortable? And it takes away some ability to self-advocate. But yeah, and I'll tell you, I've been involved in those cast out the demon moments in churches. And, you know, we have inside of us, some more pronounced than others, what we call in the DID community protectors. And the protectors are holding trauma to help us. You know, they'll hold on to this trauma so we can function day to day as a human being. And I know now, looking back at those casting out moments, we're taking a protector and we're telling it, get out, and taking away the protection of the person who's very vulnerable and not ready, you know, or maybe not in a position on a particular day or wanting to work through trauma. And we're saying, we're going to take that protection away from you. And boy, I just think it's cruel beyond measure. Super, super cruel.
Can I ask, how much time do you have left? Because I have several different rabbit trails I could go down right now, and I'm just trying to figure out in my mind which one we should go with.
We'll probably like 10 minutes.
10 minutes? Oh gosh. Oh, oh my God. What were you just saying? I forgot the rabbit trail.
About protectors being cast out in demonic exorcism.
You know what? Let's just skip the rabbit trail and get another story, and we'll find a rabbit trail from there. There are so many I want to read. I think I'm going to summarize the very first one in our Google Doc.
Okay.
Ellie's story. I'm going to summarize it for time's sake. And if we get to the point where I do a YouTube series, then I can actually read it in full. Ellie, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I'll try to get to it in full sometime. Okay. Ellie has, her pronouns are she, her, by the way. Ellie says, I've been a Christian all my life, but as I've discovered a host of diagnoses, bipolar, autism, and generalized anxiety, to name a few, and work to unmask, I've come into more and more difficulties with my previous community of faith. And she mentioned some other things that contributed to the conflict involving being queer and wanting to go into ministry when she's a woman. She says she gets labels like lazy for having burnout and avoidant coping skills for anxiety. She says, I get called selfish for setting boundaries and asserting my unique needs. I still struggle to distinguish in my own heart and mind if I am actually lazy and or selfish. It's turned me into a burnout people pleaser, but I'm trying to just see that God will see me through. Just trust that God will see me through the confusion. And here's the phrase I really wanted to get to. She was told, quote, you don't need anything other than food, water, and the Holy Spirit. And there is so much more in this. Let me summarize. She's been told that she's demon possessed. She's been told bipolar is a made up thing for people living in sin. But she's also been told you need to pray for healing. So is it real or not? Is it a made up thing? Or am I supposed to pray for help from it? Like, what's... And this part hit me hard. I still struggle with distinguishing sin in my life from autistic executive dysfunction and trauma. I hate myself for it often. Before I became initially diagnosed, I thought everything was entirely my fault.
Wow.
And I will not be able to read the rest. I'm just going to skip to the last paragraph, which gives a little bit of hope. It says, I intend to be a leader in the church, Lord willing, of course, and pave paths for young people like me who will know God's love first and foremost. I don't know where you are in your faith, but if you still talk to God, please pray for my vision and hope for the future.
Mm-hmm.
That's something, just that story really resonated with me, because when you're dealing with mental health issues, it can be harder to do basic things like shower, like be patient. And that can be because you're dealing with very real issues. And having to sort out the guilt through that, I know in my own experience, can be really painful.
Yeah.
You just don't know how much is me and how much is my problems and how much is me reacting to just the way the world is. And you don't know. So I know personally, lately especially, I've agonized a lot over times when I have been in an extremely bad mental health place and maybe made impulsive decisions or something. And I just don't know how much of what I do is a natural response and how much of it is like a problem. And a lot of times I'm splitting hairs. I'm talking about like a specific intonation I used when I was talking with someone, like, was that too rude or whatever? But it becomes this just constant agonizing of, did I mess up? Because I always mess up.
Yeah.
And so the Bible, church and all, it's supposed to talk about forgiveness. But if you're different, people expect you to take, they shame you for things that aren't even sins. So you're supposed to have like this grace and this forgiveness that empowers you to live your best life, to use the use the phrase all over social media. But instead you end up with, in my experience at least, with more shame, more guilt. Because if you disappoint the pastor, then you've disappointed Jesus, is what it feels like.
Yeah. Wow. If I can jump in real quick, Ellie has identified herself in our comments in the live recording. And thank you, Ellie, for being courageous to share your story. And Elora, she says, you summarized her story well. She says, I appreciate this so much. And hearing compassion for my story is so healing. And I think that's probably something important for all of us to hear, that just caring is so helpful.
I know it's probably about time for us to close out. Is it okay if I close out? Because I have something specific I think we should end with.
Sure.
I would love to, but if I could jump in real quick, and I'm on the story that I had chosen, which is an anonymous, a 19-year-old that now has been she was 19 at the time, but what really made me think of this story is what you were saying, Elora, is this woman at 19 had symptoms of bipolar anxiety and panic disorder, but hadn't been diagnosed. And so she was prayed for and told she had secret sins and offered herbal remedies. But, what I just heard in the story that you told from Ellie and this story is, this woman is saying, even though I know it's not true, I'm still programmed to believe that good Christian girls should be happy and smiling. And that's she says, even now, that's a deep down feeling that I can't shake. And I just, that is just so heartbreaking to think, even after people are diagnosed, are still saying, I can't shake this feeling that I was taught that it's a me problem. I hate that. It's so painful.
I feel that.
Yeah. There was another woman, I can't remember what she had, a physical disease. I think it was like cerebral palsy or something. And she said that after like a couple decades of the church, praying, believing for healing, trying to get her to believe for healing, and just like, oh, it's going to come, God's going to heal you, that she eventually left the church and the faith altogether. And she said she was never healed. She still has the disease, but her life is so much happier now that she's just accepted it And it's just like she's learned to live with the disability as opposed to always trying to fight it. And I think there's just something to of just like accepting, you know, whether it's autism, like who you are, or just like some things, you know, are just the cards that were dealt. And it's not, doesn't always have to be this fight of like, oh, if I just believe harder, if I just do these things and go to church more and read my Bible every day, then God will do this for me. And instead of just be like, no, I'm just going to live my life.
Yeah. It can feel often in religious circles like being healed is a prerequisite to everything else. Like, you're not necessarily a bad person for being disabled, but you can't really move on with your relationship with God until you sort that out. Like, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
just look at this. Next time you go to a church, I want you to check and see if there's a ramp. If a pastor who used a wheelchair came to your church, would he even be able to get on stage?
Hmm.
And also check the doors, because I've seen doors in churches and at ORU, just blatant disregard for accessibility. And ORU in our music building, it's called Timco. The doorways weren't wide enough to get a wheelchair in the door of the bathroom. So my friends were going out in thunderstorms to different buildings in between classes so they could have the pleasure of peeing. Like, it's so messed up. It's so messed up. Like, I've seen this before. It's not just Timco at ORU.
Yeah.
There's plenty of places where they might have an accessible stall inside the bathroom, but the door to the bathroom itself is narrow. A good rule of thumb is ask yourself, could I carry a couch through this door? And if you can't, a wheelchair's probably not getting through. Another good accessibility test is to just ask, how much does this building feel like a rave? And if it feels like a rave, it's probably not safe for people who are autistic or have certain disorders where you can have a seizure from flashing lights, that sort of thing. That's not relevant at all. I just thought if you want another fun accessibility test. And the answer to that is, everyone, I love Spirit Halloween, but those first few feet in the door are a feat for my autism. I'm just like, just get through, just punching through. Okay, we got to wrap up. That's not to say autistics don't even like rave. Whatever. I've definitely heard autistics talk about liking rock concerts because you can go to the mosh pit and everyone's stimming together. Group stim time. We all jump. But there's a big difference between choosing to have an extreme sensory experience and having an extreme sensory experience as a requirement to access Jesus. It's a big difference. If you're going to a rock concert, you know what you're getting into. You're paying money. You're going to have a good time, and you have a specific time frame. It's very different if you have a rock concert in your church and you judge people for not being part of your worship. Obviously, everyone's going to worship God in different ways. But if you're like, oh, you didn't participate in worship, do you not have faith in Jesus? And there's like a drummer with, you know, like lasers behind him. I don't know if the problem's Jesus, Barb. Okay. Here's what I wanted to end with. In the Bible, the Good Samaritan is the pinnacle of Christian kindness, looking out for your neighbor. Back in that day, sometimes robbers would attack someone on the road and leave them there as bait. So when the Good Samaritan goes to rescue his injured stranger that he's just met, he is risking his life without any expectation of return to help a sick or disabled person. And then he gives up of his own time, resources, finances. Maybe he had somewhere to be and he didn't make it there. I don't know. To help a sick or injured or disabled person. And we didn't have any time to get into current events, which is very odd for this podcast. I've listened to a lot of recent episodes, and we there's usually a lot of current events involved. But frankly, the people who should be installing better ventilation in the churches should be leading the way in installing better ventilation, in encouraging mask wearing, in encouraging whatever. I'm not going to go into a list of ways you can prevent COVID, but a lot of churches have not been doing any of them, and in fact have been fighting against them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When I look at the church, that is what got me stopping going to church. It was, these were the people I'd grown up with who had told me that they loved me in ways other people couldn't. That you grow up in church and they tell you, we're your family. And the world out there is evil and sinful and they all just want to hurt you. But we love you more than anyone else. No one will ever have your back like we do. The church I went to my whole life, this was at the very beginning of the pandemic. There was a lockdown. We didn't know anything about the virus yet. This was at the very beginning. And they had their women's retreat. It was a big party. And everyone was so proud of it.
Mm.
You know, in college, one of my best friends, I attribute her with saving my life from suicide. There's a lot of things I attribute with saving my life from suicide, and that is not me exaggerating. Like, I was on the edge, holding on by a thread for years there. It's not exaggeration when I say there's quite a few different things that saved my life from suicide, because it was a constant threat. But she's one of my best in the whole world. I trust her judgment more than almost anyone. She had my back when no one else did. She set me straight when I messed up. And she had cancer when she was a child. And it completely wrecked her immune system. And I look at the people that promise they love me more than anyone else, and day in and day out, they make it clear that her life is worth shit to them. This person who I love more than most. I worry so much about her. And people don't care that she's Rapunzel in a tower, locked away. I saw people that taught me in Sunday school, people that were mentors, people I wanted to be like when I grew up, posting blatantly, I don't care if only the disabled die, why can't I get a haircut?
Mm.
So I look at the church, and the church should be leading this. Where's the Good Samaritan? The pinnacle of Christian goodness is risking your life, giving up your money, giving up your time, rerouting your life to protect an enemy and a stranger who's sick or injured or disabled. And instead, the church has said that masks are the mark of the beast, that doing anything to prevent COVID is a sign that you don't love Jesus, and they're leaving me and my loved ones to die.
Mm.
So forgive me if I get all emotional at the end. But I want so badly to feel God's love. And there's no one there to give it to me.
Yeah.
There's no one there to give it to me because I can't safely go into your church. I may not have a damaged immune system like my friend, but I'm still trying to avoid COVID. I'm already disabled. I cannot handle any more potential long-term health effects. I cannot risk that. I can barely do my job as it is. I'm finally thriving for the first time in my entire life. I'm where I'm meant to be, and I'm happy, and I'm trying to continue that. If I get COVID, it's gone.
Yeah.
At least for a few weeks. and I need that. I can't give up income for a few weeks. I can't risk. I don't know how to end this. All I know is the church has treated this pandemic, in my opinion, the exact opposite of how they're commanded to.
Yeah.
And it makes me hate. I didn't really know how to hate before this pandemic. I really didn't. Like, I knew how to really dislike someone, but I didn't understand what it was like to just feel this endless anger that you don't know what to do with. And it just doesn't go away.
It's so, the hypocrisy became so much more blatant when you have people claiming that they do love their neighbor, but they won't wear a mask and that's the bare minimum. Thank you for sharing all of that. I think that it was a wake-up call for a lot of us with how so many people responded with COVID and are still being dismissive about it.
Yeah, and frankly, it's not just right-winger. There's a lot of people who call themselves proud leftists. They'll tell you, don't cross lines, don't go to Starbucks right now, they're union busting. We need to, even if it's uncomfortable, you can't do it. But if you talk about masks or something, then it's like, oh, well, I don't think there's anything we can do. Like, there are so many people who are all about rallying for the common good. But when it comes to disabled people, suddenly it feels like they just don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing this powerful message. And I remember leading a church, and I'm in California, so it's everything is legislated here, and we were doing an upgrade in our building, and they said, okay, as doing this upgrade, then you have to fix a bathroom issue because our bathrooms weren't accessible to wheelchairs. And it was a huge project. It involved making the doors go in instead of out and things. And our contractor said, I think as a church, you can get an exemption from that. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Wait, shouldn't a church be the most accessible? Like, shouldn't we be more accessible than the law rather than asking for exemptions from the law? And I think we are so bass-ackward in our beliefs that the church shouldn't have to do anything. We shouldn't have to do any background checks on our children's ministry workers because, we're all good. We all love each other. We're all family, as Elora said, and we should be the most accessible, most caring, most diligent of all peoples. But we just have been told this lie that's just so horrible. And you've demonstrated it so powerfully tonight. And thank you for that.
I think that's how my ex-church got away with having the whole women's ministry thing. But frankly, I don't know if anyone would have stopped them anyway. It's Southern Oklahoma. I'm pretty sure it was more of an official requirement that is probably, I don't know, treated as a suggestion. I don't know. I'm no expert on how the law works around here, but it was pretty obvious from the start that people didn't think taking any precautions to prevent COVID was acceptable to a lot of people. That's a whole sidetrack, but the culture around here is it's very Republican in certain ways.
Yes.
But I think also what's really important, like in a season where many of us are focused on race issues, transgender issues, really important things, I think you've brought a really important topic to say, hey, and ableism as well is something that we need to be thinking about in this season. So thank you for sharing as you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Wonderful stuff. April, good hanging out with you tonight.
Yes, this is a good show. Thank you, Elora. Tell everyone, Elora, where they can find you.
Okay, you can find me by my name, Elora Dodd, ELORA DODD, on a lot of places. And if I'm not there under my name, I'm there under Online One Room Schoolhouse. 1 is a number. And if I'm not there under that, it's just One Schoolhouse, because sometimes you can't put in as many letters.
And if you're listening, we'll put all of Elora's links in the show notes.
Yeah,
too.
I'll just send that to you.
Perfect.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much, Elora. Thank you all for hanging out with us tonight. Evangelicalish.com. Go check out the website and hang out with us. Jeremy, we missed you tonight. April, great job. Love you all. We'll see you all again soon.